Welcome to Leadership Lanes. I'm your host Abhijit, and today we are excited to welcome Rick Olson to the podcast. Rick is a retail tech and strategy expert with over 20 years of experience working with major brands like Target and consulting for Fortune 500 companies. Rick has led everything from supply chain transformations to pop-up store activations, and he knows firsthand how these short-term retail spaces can create big business opportunities. His experience spans across data analytics, inventory optimization, and using emerging tech to boost customer experiences. And he's here to talk about driving efficiency in pop up stores with data analytics and inventory management. Welcome to the podcast, Rick.
Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate that
Yeah.
that intro.
So let's start with some stats. So pop-up stores have grown by an average of 1.4% per year between 2018 and 2023. With this steady growth, what do you think are the key factors driving retailers to increasingly invest in these pop-up store formats?
Yeah, good stat there. I think with COVID, I think pop-ups came down a little bit, and so we're starting to see that uptick. That's, back to the COVID statement. But what do I think is going on? You know what? When you look at the percent of sales between an e-commerce versus a physical or digital, right? Majority of it's still done in a physical place, a physical platform. Pop-up stores bring in exclusivity, they bring in a unique experience. And I think for the retailer, you really look at what is the intent of it, and that can bring a lot of that customer personalization as well.
That's interesting because much of this also had to do with the pandemic, that the e-commerce sales rose very quickly. Before we move on to the next segment, right? One quick question here. How do these pop-up store formats look at e-commerce?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've been doing pop up since 2002. That was our first one that I've been a part of. So 60 some pop-ups, right? And so this was before really the e-commerce boom. So when you start looking at the balance of these now, you're looking at the physical retail space is about experience. It's about differentiation. When you're online e-commerce, you're hunting. You know what you're going on for. You grab it and you're in and out. When you're in a physical retail or a pop-up store, you want to touch, you want to feel, you want to smell, you want to bring all your senses in there because that's what that's about. That's what shopping is in my space.
So pop-up stores generate up to 80 billion in annual revenue, and projections indicate that the market value will exceed around 95 billion by 2025. What do you think are the specific factors that attract consumers to these stores? Is it more about exclusivity of the products or the experience, or is it something else that drives? Just FYI, right? I mean, before you answer, last month I visited California, and my sister, I just went there, and my sister is like, okay, before you unpack, let's go to this pop-up store.
That's it. You know, I think it's about that exclusivity. It's about getting your hands on the product first. And that's usually what a lot of pop-ups are, right? It's an introduction of a brand, a product line for a retailer. And so it's a little bit of that FOMO. If I get, I think that's what drives a lot of people to these spaces because it's different. And people want something different. They want that VIP. They want the red rope experience. That's why the hot clubs are, right? I mean, so it's about getting into the right place.
That's great, actually. And my next question is somewhat related to the same aspect that you mentioned, right? Since the reasons of consumers going into a pop-up store are, I wouldn't say fundamentally different, but to an extent different than the traditional retail stores. So from a retailer's perspective, how do these stores fit into a broader retail strategy, and how can data be leveraged to make these events more successful?
Yeah. The how I look at it is it's the customer journey, right? I mean, everybody's supposed to go after it. It's awareness, consideration, decision, right? Service and loyalty. And when you put that together, it's what's the KPI for a pop-up? And I think that's going to be who's the stakeholder? Is it going to be coming out of your marketing? Is it coming out of your merchandising? And more likely it's coming out of your marketing area, right? So it's about awareness. And if you look at your cost of acquisition, your CAC, you're looking in retail, it's about $10 a person. There is a financial metric right there that you can go after to say, all right, what's my advertising for this? How much does it cost? Because there's a lot that goes into a pop-up. But I think that's something that I would look at first is when you're deciding to do something like this is what's the reason and who's the stakeholder and what's your KPI, or else you have no measurements at the end. And you always got to think any project has to have a measurement at the end.
My next question is again based on that, actually, right? So these stores or these events, right, operate in a very fast-paced, sort of a temporary environment. And what, in your opinion, how critical is data analytics for making decisions on inventory and pricing in real time during these short-term events, considering the fact that it is a short-term event and the retailers know that we won't be there next year or we won't be there a few months down the lane.
Yeah. The I would look at your data analytics for a pop-up because it's a short-term living, breathing environment. And now is it's your test to playground as well. And so if the retail, think of this as a little offshoot, it's a little bit of a little you can have some flexibility if things don't go perfect, but it's going to happen fast paced. It's going to be quick. Now is the time to put in some computer vision. Now is the time to do some foot traffic analysis. Now is the time to do some pricing analysis. And so this analytics with the technology piece of it can put together the package that will make some decisions that you can in real time for this pop-up. How quickly does that real-time data come in? Because it has to. Because if you're there for a day, 2 days, or a month, you have a little bit of a different metric. But that then can be rolled into your corporate environment in your broad brick and mortar stores. In a pop-up, the goal is to actually in retail, I think, is you want to try to have your online metrics in a brick and mortar space. And that can be from your dwell time from looking at a product. Your pop-up, let's put some technology in there to look at dwell time. How long are people standing in front of it? What's your foot traffic? You can do the old-fashioned clicker, count people in, or you can have some type of counter, right? A digital laser that comes across, or it can be overhead. It's about trying to get to that same type of data metrics that you would have in an online environment in an offline environment.
It's quite interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong here. You're trying to say that it is data analytics at pop-up stores is looked at more from a feed into your corporate environment kind of a system, wherein the data gathered from these stores help you take decisions from a much more broader retail strategy that you have or that you want to take.
Absolutely, right? I mean, when you do a product launch, right? If this is brand new, first time consumers seeing it, you can look at packaging. How are they responding to it? What kind of questions do they ask about that packaging, right? Getting that one-to-one physical environment from your team that gets uploaded into the system. What's the price sensitivity? What items move fast? Because that will all go into your data analytics package for what's going to happen in your entire chain, whether it's 5 stores, 10 stores, 1,000 stores plus.
That's quite interesting to hear, actually. So moving on to my next question. So could you provide some real world examples or insights into how predictive models can be used in pop-up stores to anticipate demand and even optimize offerings? Now, this is quite tricky because typically prediction models are based on historic data and we don't have that here. So I'll be very interested to hear this.
Yeah, great question, because I think I came from a business continuity, a crisis management world as well in retail. So you put those two together, a pop-up store is organized chaos in crisis management. Now you put some data analytics on top of it. Always number one, have a contingency plan. Your data, you're right, it's going off of historical. It's never going to be 100% accurate. But you take the historical data and you try to build that into forward-looking projections. Now, in a pop-up store, and we're talking about a very compressed time frame, where traffic in a typical store might be, we'll say, 1,000 individuals over an hour. It might be in a pop-up store, what is the capacity space for how many people can be in there within that hour? And then you can build in what is the limitations of how many items an individual can purchase, right? So you have some of those criteria that you wouldn't have traditionally in a retail. But I would always have that contingency, but I would take the historical patterns of what did the item sell previously or a similar item. That's what you need to do, right? When you're building your profile, you're forecasting for the 52 weeks, you break it down into a 1 week time frame and compress all that sales data. Then you look at cartons, case packs. You look at an infrastructure of your building. How much freight can you actually hold in it, right? So you have some different constraints, but that's your contingency plan to build your highs and your lows of inventory management of top selling items and low selling items. I think going back to your analytics, and we talked a little bit earlier, is your foot traffic and your dwell time. Now, if you have overhead computer vision looking at where do people all go towards in one particular area, is it a style? Is it a design? Is it a price? Is it something cool is happening in that space? Some type of experiential activity. Now you can actually build in as well into your profile mix and say, you know what, I can't have everybody in that section. Let's use some of that technology, move that product around and spread it out in the space that you're working for. Now that can be translated for analytics into your brick and mortar location as well. How do you drive the traffic or flow of the individual consumers to where you want them in the store based on the popularity of a product?
That's quite interesting. From what I get is it's more external factors, you would, if I may say, than the first. It's more third-party data than the first-party data that we rely on, is what I can derive from from your answer.
It certainly can be. And one of the most important things is, back to my example of how many people are coming into your space. You can do the old clicker model. There's always non-technical ways to do it, but it's always on the back end. That analytics or piece of it is I can go write down how many people came in the last hour, or it can automatically be uploading into a cloud environment, a lake, right? Some type of hub where now all the data can come together where you can extrapolate a story and not just one piece of data.
That's interesting. And my next question is kind of related to what we are discussing. So pop-up stores have limited time to react to shortages or even surpluses. What do you feel data analytics can help retailers strike the right balance with inventory, ensuring that they don't overstock or understock during the event?
I think your real-time analytics can really provide your automated ordering. Do you have inventory coming in further throughout the day? So that instantaneous, we're completely selling out of it. The black button-down shirt because it has the designer's name on it, or it's really cool or popular, whatever it might be, and instantaneously that can be fed to your supply chain to pull that inventory in. We talked about those contingency plans. And then you start talking about infrastructure and how quickly can you get that into your building? What kind of trucks, trailers, limitations do you have in the city? But it's getting that real-time data is critical versus waiting till the end of the day, because now you're talking about reaction time that you may need in an hour versus waiting till the following day because you have transit time to worry about now. So that's just one of the examples I can see of bringing some of that in. And that automated ordering, mobile point of sale. I mean, that's just a simple one versus having everyone go into a register to stand in a long line. What if you had individuals walking around with mobile POS? That's instantaneous as well. And you can get answers. You can give a lot of customer service as well from that mobile POS.
Do you feel, and this is a question I've asked to a lot of retail consultants coming on the show, do you feel the future retail store is becoming much more IoTized or like IoT oriented? You see much more devices coming again and again, newer devices, newer tech coming again installed into these stores. Now, just a quick background, right? Just a few months back, we had a big retail store stop using the digital price device that they had planned to integrate in most of their stores. So do you see retailers pushing to have these devices and consumers pushing back to not have them?
It's a mix. I think it goes right back to that retailer. One of the things that I've discovered and I've been pushing for years is the infrastructure for a store. BYOB, right? Bring your own device. Is such a critical piece now because of the data that you can capture when you can bring in an individual, a consumer into your store and they jump on your Wi-Fi. Now that's a different type of environment, and you got to stay away from PII information there. But it's getting after the dwell time. It's getting after some of those online metrics in a physical location. Now, how do I feel about, is it going away? I think we've seen a lot of pushback on self-checkouts. We've seen a lot of pushback on there's not enough staff in a checkout lane, right? And so you got that push-pull at the beginning of how do you service somebody. Putting a mobile device in the hand of any of your team that's in the store, now you can easily transact and you can get the consumer what they need at that moment. And if it's checking out, take care of them. Let's get them in and out. Take their money. Why make someone waiting is a waste, period. I mean, we all experience it every single day, whether you're on the call, whether you're waiting is a waste. And so how you can speed that up for any individual on any of their daily journeys, I think that's important.
Well, dwell time is certainly one key metric we can spend a whole episode on.
Yes.
So, yeah, and I mean that ties back to data a lot, to be in my opinion. I mean, to reduce using data to reduce the dwell time is one long discussion in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree.
So moving on to my next point, right? So given the short operational window, how can real-time inventory prevent lost sales opportunities, specifically in pop-up stores?
Yeah, a little bit more on that real time is when you're condensing an event, hours are like weeks. Weeks are like months, right? And so you're really compressing. So you need as fast of information as possible. And so real time is critical. Now, the tools that you can get that through inventory tracking RFIDs. You can get that through shopping with NFC. These are technology pieces, but it's actually enhancing the consumer experience. Because if I know real time through an RFID tag that the inventory left the space, it instantaneously will update my counts. Now, whether that is through a point of sale, a sale, or a theft, all I know is it left the space. I need to replace it. And that's critical in those environments. And we can get into a whole shortage piece in a different time too for retail and how that's really impacting the brick and mortar and the chains. But in a condensed pop-up store, you don't see a lot of it. Of course it happens, but you don't see a lot of it. But it's inventory that you need to manage instantaneously. And if I know how many black medium shirts I have on the floor at any certain time, that's critical because I need to bring more inventory from the back room or wherever my offsite storage might be for that as well.
Got it. So moving on to my next question, which is more focused towards the challenges pop-up stores face. And some of these questions might be specific to pop-up stores, but are applicable to, in general, the complete retail corporate setup as well. So coming to the first one, right? We see retailers often face challenges with obtaining real-time data during these pop-up events or in general. So what do you feel are some of the biggest hurdles to accessing this real-time, accurate, even actionable data in real time?
Yeah, I'm glad you framed it up of pop-up and brick and mortar, right? In the retail chain, because this whole conversation is a brick and mortar. It's just in a tiny, tiny condensed space. It's a learning environment, as I shared. So I think some of the biggest challenges, infrastructure. I keep going back to that, right? In a pop-up and or brick and mortar, what is your connectivity in the building? Do you have enough Wi-Fi connectivity to run all these devices, as we talked a little bit earlier? What's the loading and unloading process of a truck? What are the regulations of a city? When can you bring in a truck? How big can the truck be for that entire supply chain? But the most important thing is, and I think that's one of the potential real-time challenges that you have is, how are your people being treated in an environment like that? Do they have the right resources and to take care of the consumer? We all are consumers, right? Whether or not we go to the dentist, doctor, grocery store, retail store, online, offline, we want to get something accomplished. We have a problem that we need to get a solution for. When you go to a retail store, I have a list I want to go in, I want to find that product on the shelf, and I want to pay for it, and I want to leave, right? Don't make it a challenge for me. So how can we make sure the infrastructure is set up properly, whether it's tools and or training, to make sure that that happens appropriately?
It's a good segue to my next part, which is the tools, right? I mean, what do you feel like? How can retailers overcome these challenges? Is it just tools? Is it just infra? Is it more of a company culture? Is it more silos? What do you feel it is?
Uh, I've had a lot of conversations with the retailers. I would say the first one is data. It's data's all over. And I worked with
Yes.
one that had data on tapes, right? Back in the old day of tapes, and they wanted to know what the history of their sales were. Well, let's go to pull up this, and so I think that's a piece of it. And if you want to build a end-to-end story, you need to know who your consumer is, what do they want, and then what are they buying, right? Because I think it's if you asked me if a price increased, would I still buy it? Well, yeah, I love it. But maybe that's not real the case. Maybe if the price increases now with inflation, there's a lot of other variables, I'm not going to buy it. But the retailer still bought what they said, right? So getting some of that real information in, I think is critical. And I think that's one of the big things is data needs to be organized properly. Second one is communication. Everything communicates. And whether or not we talked to early, the Wi-Fi in the store, the infrastructure for data speeds. If there is no contingency and your store updates all their information once a night, that really can impact a lot of your data as well.
Yeah, perfect. Moving on to the next, which is the last segment in the episode. What would you say are the top three best practices for retailers to effectively use data analytics to maximize the efficiency and success of the pop-up stores?
Yeah.
Most of it, I believe you answered. It is just more of a summarizing kind of thing.
Let's pull it together, right? The top three, I would say, and again, as I mentioned, pop-up is a small brick and mortar, so these can translate to everywhere. Is look at that consumer data, right? It's your job is to try to find out what does that consumer want to build that thing, right? And that can be online, offline, right? What's their dwell time? What is how long are they in an aisle? What items are they looking at in that aisle? So that's one piece of it, right? Second one is develop a contingency plan. No plan will be 100% right, right? You got 80% in the middle that will work just like you want it. You got 10% on the top side that you're going to completely miss, and 10% on the bottom that you're also going to miss because you're going to be overstocked. Try to get to that contingency plan to make sure that you're covered. The third thing is, leverage some of these spaces as testing grounds. And when you're looking at your pop-up, very easy. It's a contained environment, right? You can bring in some new technology, some new infrastructure, play with it. I think when you're in a brick and mortar space, you still need to test and learn. And whether or not that's having a single store, maybe it's having a single area in your store. Maybe it's bringing in the right advocates within your corporate environment to help shepherd some of those new technologies through, or new ideas even.
One final last question, and this again ties back to the first question that I asked, is how can retailers ensure that they are using data analytics not just for immediate success, but to inform long-term retail strategies as well? And this ties back to the first question you answered, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. Predictive analytics is the key to the future to make sure that you are not overstocked, understocked. It's having the right product at the right place at the right time, right? That's the basic generalization of retail. But I think it's so critical, and it will only get better with predictive analytics, data analytics, bringing your Gen AI into that modeling as well. All that builds the infrastructure of the future of how do you become better, because inventory sitting in a back room in a storage center, warehouses, 3PLs, that's expensive. And everyone's trying to increase their margins. So right product, right place, right time.
Thanks a lot, Rick, for coming on the podcast. It was a great pleasure talking to you. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you for the time. This was I'm glad we brought this to light. So thank you.
Yeah.